Hi, everybody, and thank y'all for joining us for our Beef Brunch News Update on Tuesday, January 19th. We are going to get everything kicked off with Lee giving us an update on what's going on in the northwest side of the state.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to be with y'all this morning. Raining here in my corner of the state right now, and I think the forecast is calling for rain on into the weekend. So we didn't have a lack of moisture to begin with, and now we sure don't, especially by this weekend if we get the rain that we're forecast to get. Um, we did, since the last news update, I kind of alluded to a chance of some winter weather, and we did get a little bit of snow. It wasn't that much, and it melted off really fast. And the kids sure enjoyed making snowmen and snowball fights and all that. But it does leave a mess. Some of our northern friends, I don't know how you do it. I guess it just stays frozen the whole winter. But it sure does leave a mess when we get some snow. But as far as pasture conditions and cattle conditions, things continue to look pretty good here. The cold did set ryegrass back just a little bit, and I noticed some clover that the other day on a place that was up, and some cattle was grazing on it, but it did ding it a little bit, twist it up a little bit. Should come out of it, especially if we can get through this week without any real cold temperatures, which they're not forecasting. Long range outlook I saw as far as for our part of the world going into the end of January is above normal temperature. So if that proves to be true, then that'll be good for our winter pastures. Um, and this moisture that we keep talking about, it creates problems. Everywhere you go is a mess. Um, as far as feeding areas and pens, if you got anybody that's doing any work in cattle pens, unless they just it's just a real mess right now. But cattle look good, and everything is progressing well. Having some computer issues on my end, so I hope I hadn't been interrupted. But one thing I do want to talk about is, as extension agents, we travel around and talk to a lot of different people on a wide variety of subjects. And so whenever something comes up regularly, it kind of sticks in our mind from one producer to another. And that's something I'd like to briefly mention this morning, and that's equipment costs. The last several producers that I've talked to, it's funny, in a row, throughout the course of our conversation, equipment costs have come up, and it seems to come up now quite a bit. And we're talking about tractors, trucks, of course, trailers, hay equipment, tillage equipment. Everything is just really expensive right now. So I wanted to touch just briefly on that. I think with the past few years being as tough as they've been in the cattle business, I think it and the producers kind of evaluate their equipment needs. If you hadn't priced a 100 horsepower four-wheel drive tractor lately, my condolences to you if you do, because they're very expensive, as with everything else. So I think it bears in mind, last time we talked about planning, and Jason offered some really good advice, sit down and write out a plan. And I guess this kind of segues into that, whenever you're looking at your equipment needs, we're guilty a lot of times of trying to keep up with our neighbors and trying to keep up with our buddies, and our buddies have got to have this brand new piece of equipment or this new innovative design on something, and so naturally you want to keep up with the times and everything. But I think in tough times, as we've been alluding to in our market, tough times like we're under in the cattle business and have been under, it bears in mind to spend your money effectively. Evaluate those pieces of equipment, those equipment purchases that will actually help your bottom line, that will add value to your program, versus those pieces of equipment you kind of can do without. And it's different from operation to operation, but that it's just something to keep in mind. There's no end in sight as far as I see as equipment costs, and things are going to continue to get more expensive and everything. So I feel like it bears in mind to kind of focus on your equipment and be more careful on your equipment, because one thing I see, and it's kind of a dire situation, I think, is a lot of new producers or young producers are getting in it. They're just incurring tremendous amounts of debt on some of this new equipment. And while I don't have the answer to it, we've got to have tractor, depending on your situation. You got to have hay equipment or whatnot. But maybe there's some areas that you can get by with a used piece or hire it out cheaper than what some of this stuff's costing. So that's just my ramblings, Ashley, and I'll turn it over to Vince.
All right, thank you, Lee. No, I thought that was perfect. I know we were visiting about that just for the Hill Farm last week, so I know a lot of people appreciated that. Vince, I'll turn it over to you for our update in Central and South Louisiana.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Man, it's Lee was talking about rain up in their part of the world. We've been fortunate since that we were on the fringes of the ice and snow event here in Central Louisiana. We got some mixed sleet, mixed precip that was really cold for about a 12-hour period. We had heavy rains, not so much snow and sleet, so it was really cold and really hard on the cattle. But we overcame it, and then when that weather cleared out on Monday and Tuesday, we had brisk north winds for 4 or 5 days following that front. And I was talking to Jason earlier, and we really dried out here the last 6 days, and it's sunshiny and warm here today. And we got a lot of top dress going out on ryegrass that was pretty tattered from that cold weather and cold rain event a week ago. So that's been a blessing that we're getting this sunshine, and we're kind of on the fringes of or south of a warm front that's hanging over Central Louisiana. So we're blessed with that. We've been in a bog for probably 60 days or so, so we've kind of dried out. But as Lee alluded to, the cattle in South and Central Louisiana look great. Just depending on where you are, they had some issues getting ryegrass stands going, and some of those producers never were able to do that, get a ryegrass stand. So therefore those cattle are not so in good shape. But it's overall, the cattle look good. The fall calf crop is growing well with cattle that are on ryegrass. So we anticipate, that those calves will be right where they need to be come marketing time. Hopefully the market situation improves from some of the talk that's been going on with the grain market surging late last week. That's a correlation to lower cattle prices. So hopefully that is, hopefully it's good for the grain growers, but we need to have a common balance and get a calf market going here. As Lee alluded to, the expense of doing business, and also, if we want to venture out into, where you want to cut your costs, and able to make it in these tougher times, definitely don't cut your costs on fertilizer applications and vaccinating your cattle and getting those calves ready for market to get the best dollar value that you can. So with that being said, weather's predicted to be here. They're calling for rain starting Thursday and Friday. That front, I guess, will swag south a little bit. So we'll get some rain, but there's an awful lot of top dress going out right now on winter pastures. So we anticipate, get some good growth out of that with, lower 70-degree temperatures here in the next 4 or 5 days. So that's about all I have at this point, Ashley. I appreciate y'all having me on.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I'm going to add something before I swap it over to Jason, but we talked about this just a little bit in December, and since Lee was mentioning equipment earlier, I know he was talking big pieces of equipment for it. But for those of you that are starting to look at your spring calving seasons, don't forget to check all of that equipment, check your medical supplies, make sure you're ready to go before your calves start hitting the ground there. Jason, how does it look, over here in Northeast Louisiana, and what all do you have for us today?
Well, good morning, everybody. So it kind of ditto to what Lee was saying. I think I'm going to have to go get my boat paddle out and prepare for this week, the way they're talking about the amount of rain that they're forecasting for us. But that would be fitting. I did get out yesterday, enjoy the sunshine, took out the pressure washer and knocked the mud off the truck. My wife asked me why in the world I was doing that. I said I was just trying to make it rain a little bit more. So And it's just fitting. We ended up with about 4 to 6 inches of snow over here in the northeast side. Heavier amounts as you got over towards Madison, Tensas, over in that part of the state. They had some pretty significant little snow showers that came through there. But we ended up with about 4 to 6 inches. And as Lee said, it's just nasty right now. And it doesn't look like we're going to get much sunshine and just added moisture this week. I would just caution you, and just remember those nutritional demands on those cattle that are calving right now. There's nothing worse on our short-haired cattle than 50-degree weather and wet hides. That is an energy consumer. So just keep that in mind. We mentioned a little bit last time. We visited about the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, the CFAP. So there was some new rules that came out. So I'm going to touch on beef cattle first. So we got some guidance. USDA released some guidance yesterday related to these programs. So beef cattle will get they call it a top-up payment. And so it is not in this set of rules. It says that those rules will be released a little bit later. We hope that that'll be this month. So those top-up payments aim to rectify large differences between first quarter sales and the inventory payment rates from CFAP 1 payments, which were based on expected sales in the second and third quarter. So we know that the language that was USDA gave to us, that there would be some top-up payments for beef cattle, but in this particular set of rules that were announced, we still don't have any guidance on that at this time. Now, then we also mentioned, and I would be amiss if I did not talk a little bit about the availability for assistance for our contract growers, particularly up here in North Louisiana and the northern part of Vince's area down there in the Sabine, Vernon, that spot down in there, contract poultry growers. So contract poultry growers, that's broilers, pullets, and layers, are all eligible for this round of assistance. So they have to demonstrate a drop in revenue from the period January 1, 2020 through December 27, 2020. As compared to January 1, 2019 through December 27, 2019. So it's just going to be a comparison of those 2 years. I reached out to our local district conservationist and asked what documentation was going to be required of the growers to certify that particular loss in revenue. So historically, all of these CFAP programs have been self-certified, and he did not seem to think that that was going to change. But in terms of what documents they would have to use to self-certify, we're not real for sure on that. But he's hoping that the state office will start disseminating that information out to the county offices, the parish offices, the service centers over this coming week. So. If you understand how that works, the USDA on the federal level announces the rules. Those are disseminated down into the state offices, and then the state offices disseminated out into the local service centers. So it is a chain of events. So we just got to be a little bit patient. But sign up does start today, and it will run through February the 26th. So I encourage you to go to www.farmers.gov/CFAP, and we'll put that link, Ashley, if you will, we'll put that link in the description of the video. You can apply online. If you've already applied for either the CFAP 1 or the 2.0, I would highly encourage you to just continue with that online application. But definitely go to that website, farmers.gov/CFAP. There's a lot of good information on there. There's some facts and or Q&A on there that you can go through and look at that answers a lot of those questions. And then there's also a link off of that site for the application process. So check that out. And y'all don't pass up on that money. It's definitely an opportunity. When we're talking about costs this morning, we're going to be talking about some of the markets and the feedstuffs in just a minute. We got to take advantage of every bit of added revenue that we can get on our farms. So please take advantage of that. Moving into the markets in the 5-area feeding region, fed steer negotiated cash sales ranged 106 to 112 on a confirmed 83,733 head. Those prices were steady to $2 lower from a week ago. So we're recording this following a board closure for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So the most recent quote showed February futures were trading up 70 cents at 112.78. April up 97 cents at 118.20, and June up $1.33 at 116.28. And we'll talk in just a minute about a new report that just came out last week from USDA that talks about some of those prices on those fed cattle. 5 to 600 pound steers, medium, large ones and twos, sold between 158 and 149. For the week ending January the 15th. So that was $7 to $9 higher than a week ago. However, I'm going to give you an update. So if you follow any of the big markets, so our market around here, big market would be OKC, Oklahoma City National Stockyards. So they had a big run of cattle yesterday with a confirmed 17,500 head. And I'll digress real quick. I've spent some time, worked at Oklahoma City National Stockyards, and I'm telling you, that's a pretty good run of cattle. So the biggest run we ever had whenever I was there was around 20,000 head. And 17,500 head this time of year is a big run. So if you compare that to last year's sale this time, they had 12,638. So obviously a big run of cattle. So we've got some real markets coming out of OKC for looks like how this week is going to get cranked up. So compared to last week, that week ending January 15th, feeder steers and heifers steady to $4 lower, with most declines being seen on plainer type cattle. Steer and heifer calves up under 500 pounds, $2 to $6 higher. Over 500 pounds, steady to $2 lower. So they did see good demand on all classes of cattle. Especially for full weight and under steers. So that's hot off the presses from Oklahoma City National Stockyard sale on January the 18th. 700 to 800 pound feeder steers, medium and large ones and twos, sold between 123 and 125. Sold between 123 and 129. I'll get that straight. So that's about $2 higher than the previous week. So again, most recent quotes on that same class cattle showed March trading up $2.45 at 135.83, April up $2.30 at 138.30, and May up $2.07 at 140.25. So we need to take into consideration of what some of these markets are going to start doing on these lighter weight cattle. And these heavier weight cattle, with the cost of grains going up, that tends to drive feedlot order buyers to purchase more pounds going into the feed yard. So they'll be looking for those heavier weight cattle. As we move into further into the beginning of this year, and if we continue to see these higher grain prices, it's going to be interesting to see what that does to those heavier weight cattle, because historically when grain prices go up, those feedlot order buyers do typically start looking towards those heavier weight cattle so they don't have to feed them as long. Lean cull cows remain steady from the previous week. They ranged from 43 cents a pound to 50 cents a pound. So the USDA released the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report this past week, and it raised the 2021 livestock price estimates. So in 2020, they averaged out to about, this is fed cattle we're talking about, fat cattle. They averaged out at 108.50. USDA projects fed cattle prices will average 115.50 in 2021. They also raised their projected corn price by 20 cents a bushel, and soybean meal up $20 from December to January. So if that is realized, that'll be our highest feed costs since 2014. So that plays right into what I was talking about in terms of it'll be interesting to watch those heavier weight cattle. So moving into our feedstuffs, again, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of idea of where we are right now. So we've got some very recent price reporting on these feedstuffs, and I'm also going to tell you where we were this time last year, so we can try to keep in the context of what we're looking at in terms of higher feedstuff prices. So soybean meal up $30.10 at $475.40. This time last year we were at $313 a bushel. Soybean hulls up $5 at $135, and that's even from a year ago. Cottonseed meal up $10 at $440 a bushel. We were at $440 a ton. We were at $240 a ton this time last year, up $200 a ton over a year. Whole cottonseed is up $5 at $300 a ton, so we were at $205 this time last year. Rice bran is steady at $140, so that's up about $10 a ton from last year. Corn gluten feed meal is up $10 at $645 a ton. So this time last year we were at $510 a ton. DDGs are up $2.50 a ton at $212.50. So this time last year we were at $142. And then the real kick in the gut is corn is up 37 cents at $5.57 a bushel. This time last year we were at $4.12 a bushel. So I told y'all before, my glass is always half full. So the good thing about us feeding ruminant animals is that we do always have the ability to incorporate a forage component into putting weight on cattle. Our friends on the monogastric side feeding hogs and chickens, they are not that lucky. They depend heavily upon grains. But us in the feeding cattle, we do always have the ability to shift things around and move more towards a forage-based type diet to put weight on cattle, which does help us remain or maintain some sort of efficiency. So that's all I've got, Ashley. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank y'all all again for joining us, and we will be back with you in 2 weeks. Y'all have a great day.